So Nikon officially just made it official. The Z6 and Z7 cameras have been announced. And well, I'm going to tell you my thoughts and the two areas where I feel, possibly three areas where I feel Nikon dropped the ball, and why I feel Sony, the A7 III, is still a better bet over the Z6. So the Nikon Z6 and Z7 cameras have been announced officially. The Z6, kind of like the A7 III, the Z7, kind of like the A7R III. You have the high megapixel and you have the low megapixel. I'm looking at the Nikon website right now. 24.5 megapixel, of course, full frame, we knew this. 12 frames per second, ISO 100 to 51,200. 4K at 30 frames per second. Of course, you can do 24p as well. 120 frames per second at 1080p. So you have all the good stuff. It seems like the body itself looks like a Sony A7 series, A7 III series, with a beefier grip, which I like. I like the look and grip of these Nikons over the Sony, but if we all remember back and go back to the early days of Sony, we will remember that the first Sony cameras had horrible battery life. Of course, they were clunky with autofocus. They had a single card slot. And if you wanted to adapt lenses from the Alpha DSLRs, you could buy one of the expensive adapters and those lenses would perform, but they would perform very slow with the autofocus. So Nikon here is selling the Z6 and Z7, and you can use your old Nikon glass, all your Nikon F-mount glass, and that adapter is going to set you back over 300 bucks. So let's say we pay $2,000 for the Z6, which is like the A7 III, if we compare it to the Sony. I'll stick with that model. So $2,000, same price point as the Sony, which is awesome. You get the better ergonomics, in my opinion. The beefier dials of the Nikon look much better. Now, I haven't had hands-on time with it, but I just watched the DP review video where they go over it, first look of a pre-production model. And if you watch closely, you can see what they don't talk about, which is where the problems are going to be. If they don't talk about it and they kind of sidestep it, that's where you know that there could be issues. And there's three areas. The battery. Now, they're using the same battery as some of the Nikon DSLRs, but it's only rated to like 350 shots. The Sony A7 III battery, people are getting 1,500 shots out of it. And if it's only rated to 350 shots with the Nikon, that means if you're shooting video, you're going to have pretty horrendous battery life, or so it seems. I could be wrong. I haven't tested it, but you're going to find out tomorrow. Tons of people are going to be posting first look videos. But my guess is that video performance battery-wise is going to be abysmal, much like the Fuji X-H1 is. These days, there's no excuse for not having a really good battery. Second, a single card slot. $2,000 price point. They have a single little card slot. So you have no way to back up your images. SD cards do fail. I've had 2 fail this year alone on me. And every camera I shoot photos with these days has a dual card slot. Any at this price point usually has a dual card slot. So why didn't Nikon put in a dual card slot? I don't know, but even the more expensive Z7 doesn't have one. So that's 2 areas where they fail over the Sony. Third area, which I think there is going to be an issue that nobody's really talked about with first-hand use of it. When you adapt the F-mount lenses, because a lot of people who buy this camera are going to own Nikon glass and they want to use it on the camera. So after you pay $350 for the adapter, in addition to the $2,000 body, you're at $2,300 or so. I'm guessing that those lenses are not going to have the fastest autofocus. In other words, they're not going to be as fast as the native S series lenses for the Nikon Z series. That's how it was with Sony. That's how it is if you mount Canon glass to a Sony or adapt lenses. The AF is never as fast as the native glass. So it could be a possible issue. Now, the first-hand reports are talking about the video is a step in the right direction for Nikon, but nobody was really praising it. It doesn't have a flip-out screen. It has an articulating screen like the Sony's, which is not a big deal for most people. That usually comes into play for vlogging. And I'm filming this on a Canon 6D Mark II. I can see myself right there. I'm using a 16-35 V3. What else? Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, the native lenses coming out seem like they kind of mirror what Sony came out with when they released their A7 series. You have a 24-70 f4, which comes in at about $1,000, I believe, for an f4 24-70. You have a 35 and a 50 1.8, and they're a little on the pricey side. So I'm hoping that they're really they're really good. But from the looks of them, they don't look like a quality lens, right? They're almost double the price of the Sony offerings for the same glass, so I'm hoping there's something optically there that really sets them apart, because there has to be. Now, in many other areas, Nikon seems to have gotten this really right. As I said, the ergonomics look beautiful. The 5-axis image stabilization looks like it handily beats the Sony when you're shooting video, because for some reason the Sonys seem useless for video. So looking at the samples and the DP review videos show me that the 5-axis is working really well. So that's a plus. The color and image quality seemed really good. It seemed Nikon-like. It's weather sealed, so you're going to have, that is always good, of course, to have weather sealing. You have the top display, which I really like, that the Sonys totally lack. So on the top, you can see your settings. It reminds me of the Leica SL. You have a better EVF than the Sony A7 III, much crisper, much brighter. It's more on par with the Sony A9 EVF. You have a much sharper LCD on the back than the A7 III. So there's always these pros and cons to these cameras. No one ever makes the perfect camera, and I'm suspecting Nikon kept out the dual card slots, a beefy battery, to do something to protect their SLR sales. The D850 is hailed as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, digital SLR of all time. Only problem is you can't buy one. They're out of stock everywhere. Though I went into my Best Buy the other day, and a guy went up to the counter and he was picking up a D850 that he special ordered from Best Buy. So he walked out of there with one, but they're really hard to find. So the question is, here's a question. If you have an A7 III, do you switch to the Nikon Z6? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was really excited to test the Nikon because I thought that their 58 f9.5 was going to launch with the camera, and I was going to buy that set and I was going to go out and shoot the hell out of it, but that's not coming until next year. So all we're getting is the f4 24-70 and the 1.8 35 and 50, which is a little lackluster for me. It doesn't excite me, and Nikon needed something to get us excited. If they would have released that 58 f9.5, which is going to be big, and manual focus, which I love that. I love that. It's not coming out till next year. It should have came out at launch to show, boom, look at what we did. Compared to what Sony launched with. As of now, it looks like the Sony launch of the original A7, but with a much better body, of course. So it seems like most of the specs meet or beat the Sony A7 III. You have the same megapixels, you have 4K video without pixel binning, you have 120 frames per second, 1080p, so you got that nice slow motion. You have a better EVF, a better LCD. The AF, I suspect, is not going to be to the Sony A7 III level, just from what firsthand people didn't say about it. Nobody said, ooh, this is as good as the Sony, or this competes with Sony. They just said, It's different, it'll take some getting used to, it's good, it's accurate. So who knows how to read into that. Overall, it seems like a solid camera into the mirrorless, much better than what Nikon's done in the past. They've already ditched their 1 series, so they're going all in with the Z series. So for $2,000, if you own a lot of Nikon glass and you haven't switched to Sony, it makes sense. Though I suspect those lenses are going to focus a little slower with an adapter. If they focus the same as the native glass, I'll be very surprised. But you know, it's going to cost you, if you buy the Z6, which is the A7 III-ish model, $2,000 for the body, $300 for the adapter if you need that, $1,000 for the 24-70, it's something like $800 I think for the 35-1.8 and $600 for the 50-1.8, which is 2.5 times higher than Nikon's 50-1.8 for their SLRs. So I'm a little excited about it and I'm a little let down by it because it's not going to make people switch back to Nikon from Sony, and a lot of people have already switched to Sony from Nikon, from Canon. It's not going to make people say, ooh, now I got to go back to Nikon. If they would have provided a bigger battery, dual card slots, a flip out screen, and AF just as fast as Sony, and had a couple more special lenses at launch, I think then they would have had people switching over. Of course, people are going to switch. People get excited about new cameras, including me. I used to be the king of excitement for all new cameras, and if I liked them, I went crazy and I bought them. This one excites me, but not enough to buy it. I was ready to pre-order it with the Noct Nikkor, the new Noct Nikkor, but you know, at this point, I'd probably buy an old Noct Nikkor and adapt it with the adapter. That's an idea. I expect it's going to be good in low light. Will it reach the Sony levels? Maybe, because Nikon's pretty good in low light. But I am going to, I'll review the camera as soon as I can get one. I think Canon's going to do something different, actually, that's going to surprise some people. I think they have one thing that they're going to do that's going to be different. I also think they're going to have 2 card slots. I think they'll have a great battery system. I think they're going to have a flip out screen. I think they might not have as good of an EVF as Nikon's, but it'll be more like Sony. I think the Canon's going to surprise a lot of people who are expecting to be let down by it. So the Nikon Z6 and Z7 are official. They look great. They look like an A7 with a big, beefier grip. They just let me down personally with the battery, which is rated for 300 and some shots, the single card slot, and I suspect the autofocus is not going to be up to Sony or Canon's dual pixel. So that's my early thoughts on just the specs and what I've seen. Check out DP Review. They did a really cool first look on the camera, and I'm sure you've already seen it if you're looking at this. So it's late here. It's probably, I don't know, is it midnight yet? It's past midnight. It's 12:20 a.m. I was in bed watching YouTube. I wanted to come out here and give my thoughts on the Nikon. So that's about it. Have a good night, guys. Have a good day, and I will see you next time.